The Night of the Krasue. The village of Ban Phai was a place of simple pleasures, where rice paddies stretched as far as the eye could see, and the people lived in harmony with the land. The villagers were close-knit, bound together by tradition and shared history. Life in Ban Phai was predictable, even serene, until the night the first body was found. It was the village headman's daughter, Noi, who discovered her brother's lifeless body near the edge of the rice fields. The young man, Khon, had been strong and healthy just the day before, but now he lay pale and cold, his body drained of blood. His face was twisted in a rictus of fear, as though he had seen something unspeakable in his final moments. Panic spread quickly through the village. The elders were called to examine the body, and whispers of black magic and curses filled the air. But it was the village shaman, an elderly woman named Mae Suang, who first spoke the word that sent a chill down everyone's spine: Krasue. The Krasue was a creature of legend, a malevolent spirit that took the form of a woman's head, with entrails trailing below like twisted vines. By day, it lived as an ordinary woman, blending in with the villagers, but by night, it detached its head from its body and flew through the air, seeking fresh blood to sate its insatiable hunger. Mae Suang's words were met with disbelief. The Krasue was an old wives' tale, a ghost story told to frighten children into behaving. But the shaman's eyes were grave, and the evidence was undeniable. Khon's body had been drained of blood, with no sign of an attacker, no tracks or clues left behind. As the sun set that evening, the village was plunged into an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The people of Ban Phai barricaded their doors and windows, lighting candles and incense in hopes of warding off the evil that now stalked their streets. And among them was a hunter named Boon, a man known for his skill with a bow and his bravery in the face of danger. Boon had never been one to believe in ghosts or spirits, but the sight of Khon's body had shaken him. He knew that whatever was responsible for this death, it was something far beyond the usual threats of the jungle. Boon's thoughts turned to his childhood friend, Suda. She had been acting strangely in recent weeks, withdrawn, pale, as though a heavy burden weighed upon her. But Boon had dismissed it as the stress of caring for her ailing mother, never suspecting that something far darker was at play. The following days brought more deaths, each as inexplicable as the last. The villagers were terrified to leave their homes after dark, and the once bustling village became eerily silent at night. The fear was palpable, and the air grew thick with suspicion. Mae Suang continued to warn the villagers of the Krasue, urging them to be vigilant. She suggested placing thorny branches around their homes, as it was said that the Krasue's entrails could be ensnared by such obstacles. But despite these precautions, the deaths continued, each one more gruesome than the last. Boon took it upon himself to protect the village. He fashioned traps from bamboo and sharpened stakes, setting them around the village perimeter. He also spent his nights on watch, his bow at the ready, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. But each night, the Krasue eluded him. It was as though the creature could sense his presence and avoided him, slipping through the shadows undetected. Boon's frustration grew, as did his fear. He had never encountered an enemy he couldn't fight, but this was something beyond his comprehension. One night, as Boon patrolled the village, he noticed a flicker of light in the distance. It was coming from the direction of Suda's house. Concerned for his friend's safety, he made his way to her home, moving as quietly as possible. When he arrived, he found Suda standing by her open window, staring out into the night. Her face was pale, and her eyes had a strange, glassy look to them. She didn't seem to notice Boon's presence until he called her name. "Suda," he said softly, trying not to startle her. "What are you doing? It's dangerous to be out here at night." Suda turned to face him, and for a moment, Boon thought he saw something dark and twisted flicker in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She smiled weakly and shook her head. "I couldn't sleep," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been having nightmares, Boon. Terrible nightmares." Boon's heart ached for his friend, but he couldn't shake the unease that had settled over him. "You should come inside," he urged. It's not safe out here. Suda nodded and stepped away from the window, closing it behind her. Boone watched her for a moment, torn between his duty to the village and his concern for Suda. Something was wrong, he could feel it, but he didn't know how to help her. As he turned to leave, he heard Suda's voice again, soft and trembling. Boone, do you believe in the Krasue? The question caught him off guard, and he hesitated before answering. I don't know, he admitted. But something is out there, and it's killing our people. I'll do whatever it takes to stop it. Suda's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. Be careful, Boone, she whispered. Sometimes, the things we fear the most are closer than we think. Boone left Suda's house with a heavy heart, her words echoing in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she was letting on, but he didn't want to press her. Not yet. The deaths continued, each one more horrifying than the last. The village was gripped by terror, and Boone felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had set traps, kept watch, and yet the Krasue still evaded him, leaving a trail of blood and death in its wake. One night, as Boone sat by his fire, deep in thought, he heard a faint rustling in the bushes behind him. He grabbed his bow, ready to strike, but what emerged from the shadows was not the Krasue, it was Suda. She looked even more pale and gaunt than before, her eyes hollow and haunted. She stumbled toward him, her legs barely able to carry her weight. Boone rushed to her side, catching her before she collapsed. Suda, what happened? Are you hurt? He asked, his voice filled with concern. Suda clung to him, her body trembling. Boone, I need to tell you something, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I've been hiding something from you, from everyone. Boone's heart raced as he held her, dread creeping into his mind. What is it, Suda? You can tell me. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. I am the Krasue. Boone froze, his mind reeling from the confession. No, that's impossible. You're not a monster, Suda. You're my friend. But Suda shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It's true, Boone. I don't know how it happened, but I've been cursed. Every night, I become that thing. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't control it. Boone stared at her, struggling to process the revelation. His heart ached for his friend, but a part of him was consumed by anger and betrayal. She had been the one responsible for the deaths in the village, the creature he had sworn to hunt. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice shaking. Suda sobbed, burying her face in his chest. I was afraid. Afraid of what you would do, afraid of what I had become. I thought I could find a way to stop it, but it's too late. The curse has taken hold of me. Boone felt a surge of conflicting emotions, love for his friend, hatred for the creature she had become, and guilt for not realizing the truth sooner. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of it tore him apart. Suda, he said gently, there's only one way to end this. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and understanding. I know, she whispered. But I can't do it alone. Boone's heart broke as he nodded. He reached for the knife at his belt, his hands trembling. Suda's eyes were filled with sorrow, but also with a deep sense of peace. I'm sorry, Boone, she said softly. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I wish things could have been different. Boone couldn't bring himself to speak, his throat tight with emotion. He held Suda close, feeling the warmth of her body, knowing it would be the last time. With tears streaming down his face, he raised the knife and plunged it into her heart. Suda gasped, her body going rigid for a moment before she slumped against him. Boone held her as she took her final breath, her blood staining his hands. The curse was broken, but at a terrible cost. The phantom train of Mae Klong. The bustling Mae Klong railway station was a sight to behold. Vendors lined the platform, selling everything from fresh fruit to handmade trinkets, and the scent of sizzling street food filled the air. Amid the chaos, A group of friends gathered, excited for their weekend getaway to the coastal town of Mae Klong. There were 5 of them: Somsak, the adventurous leader of the group; Nguyen, the skeptical and pragmatic one; Ploy, the light-hearted and curious soul; Anan, the quiet but observant friend; and Dao, who loved anything related to the supernatural. As they chatted and laughed, Somsak noticed something unusual on the station's departure board. "Hey, look at this," he said, pointing to an old, faded sign listing a train that none of them had heard of before. It simply read, "Mae Klong Express, departure, 11:11 p.m. "That's strange," Nguyen remarked. "I thought the last train to Mae Klong left much earlier." Dao's eyes lit up. "Maybe it's a ghost train," she teased, winking at the group. "You know, like those urban legends where the train appears only once a year, and anyone who boards it vanishes forever." The others laughed, brushing off Dao's suggestion as just another one of her spooky stories. But as the evening wore on, their curiosity got the better of them. When 11:11 p.m. rolled around, they found themselves waiting on the platform, ready to board the mysterious train. The Mae Klong Express rolled into the station with an eerie silence, its iron body gleaming under the dim station lights. The train looked ancient, as if it had been plucked from another era, its carriages marked by time. Yet, it was in pristine condition, as though it had been carefully preserved. "This is it," Somsak said with excitement, and without hesitation, he led the way onto the train. The others followed, albeit with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The interior of the train was lavish, adorned with velvet seats, polished wood, and ornate lamps that cast a warm, golden glow. There were no other passengers in sight, and the silence was deafening. It was as if the entire train had been waiting just for them. As they settled into their seats, the train began to move, gliding out of the station with an almost supernatural smoothness. Outside the windows, the familiar scenery of Bangkok quickly faded away, replaced by dark, misty forests and unfamiliar landscapes that none of them recognized. "This isn't the usual route," Ploy noted, her voice tinged with unease. Nguyen nodded. "I don't like this. Something feels off." But before they could discuss it further, the lights flickered, and a cold draft swept through the carriage. The air grew heavy, and the warmth of the lamps dimmed, casting long, unsettling shadows. The friends exchanged nervous glances as the train plunged into darkness, the only sound being the rhythmic clattering of the wheels on the tracks. The train seemed to be moving faster now, hurtling through the night as if possessed by a force beyond their control. Suddenly, the train jolted, and the lights flickered back on. But something was different. The once empty carriage was now filled with passengers, silent, unmoving figures dressed in outdated clothing. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, staring straight ahead as if in a trance. Anan, who had been quiet until now, whispered, "Are they ghosts?" Dao nodded, her earlier playfulness gone. "I think so." The friends huddled together, fear gripping their hearts. The ghostly passengers seemed oblivious to their presence, but the air was thick with tension. As the train sped on, the friends noticed that the scenery outside the windows had changed. They were no longer passing through forests but through scenes of devastation and tragedy. First, they saw a burning village, the flames licking at the night sky, casting an eerie orange glow. The wails of the villagers echoed through the train, mixing with the crackling of the fire. The friends could only watch in horror as the scene unfolded, a massacre, blood-stained bodies strewn across the ground, and soldiers marching through the flames with cold, emotionless faces. Next, the train passed through a desolate battlefield, the ground littered with the remains of fallen soldiers. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the mournful cries of the dying filled the carriage. The friends turned away, unable to bear the sight, but the images were seared into their minds. The train moved on, showing them more scenes of horror, an abandoned village plagued by a deadly disease, the streets filled with the sick and dying, a sinking ship, its passengers screaming for help as they were swallowed by the sea, and a collapsing bridge, the cries of those trapped on it fading into the abyss. Each scene was more horrifying than the last, and the friends began to understand the true nature of the train. This was the phantom train, a spectral locomotive that carried the souls of those who had died in tragic circumstances, forever reliving their final moments. "We need to get off this train," Nguyen said, her voice trembling. "If we don't, we'll be trapped here too." "But how?" Ploy asked, panic rising in her voice. "The doors are locked, and there's no way to stop the train." Somsak, always the leader, tried to stay calm. "There has to be a way. We just need to find out what's keeping the train on this cursed journey. Maybe if we solve the mystery, we can escape." The friends decided to search the train for clues. They moved through the carriages, carefully avoiding the ghostly passengers, who seemed to grow more restless with each passing moment. The further they went, the more the train seemed to decay around them, the luxurious interiors rotting away, the walls peeling, and the air growing colder and more oppressive. Finally, they reached the front of the train, where they found an old conductor's cabin. Inside, they discovered a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. The journal belonged to a man named Captain Cha Chai, the original conductor of the Mae Klong Express. As they read through the journal, the horrifying truth was revealed. Captain Cha Chai had been a devoted railway worker, proud of his service on the Mae Klong line. But one fateful night, the train had derailed due to faulty tracks, plunging into a ravine. All aboard were killed, passengers, crew, and the captain himself. But Captain Cha Chai's spirit had been unable to move on. Racked with guilt over the tragedy, he had vowed to continue his journey, waiting for the day when he could deliver his passengers safely to their destination. The phantom train was the manifestation of his unfulfilled promise, cursed to repeat its doomed journey until someone could set his soul free. "We have to find Captain Cha Chai's spirit," Somsak concluded. "He's the one keeping the train running. If we can help him find peace, maybe we can stop this nightmare." With renewed determination, the friends made their way to the engine room at the front of the train. The room was filled with old, rusted machinery, and in the center stood a ghostly figure, Captain Cha Chai. He was dressed in his conductor's uniform, his face etched with sorrow as he stared out at the tracks ahead. Somsak stepped forward cautiously. "Captain Cha Chai," he called out. "We know about the accident. We know you're trying to finish your journey, but it's time to let go." The captain turned to face them, his eyes filled with sadness. "I failed them," he said, his voice echoing with despair. "I failed my passengers. I can't leave until I've brought them home." "But you can't," Dao said gently. "They're already gone. You did everything you could, but it's time to rest. Your passengers need to move on, and so do you." For a moment, the captain seemed to struggle with their words. But then, something changed. The tension in his face eased, and the ghostly train began to slow. The scenes of horror outside the windows faded, replaced by a peaceful, moonlit countryside. "Thank you," Captain Cha Chai whispered, his form beginning to fade. "Thank you for helping me see the truth." As the captain disappeared, the train came to a gentle stop at a small, serene station. The friends hurriedly got off, relieved to feel solid ground beneath their feet. They watched in awe as the train, now empty, slowly faded away, leaving behind nothing but a gentle breeze and the distant sound of a train whistle. The friends stood in silence, processing what had just happened. They had boarded a train of nightmares, faced the spirits of the past, and somehow survived. The experience had left them shaken, but also bonded them in a way they had never imagined. "We should go," Nguyen finally said, breaking the silence. "Before something else happens." They began the walk back to Mae Klong, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. As they walked, they couldn't help but glance back, half expecting to see the phantom train reappear. But it was gone, its tragic journey finally at an end. As they reached the edge of the town, Somsak turned to his friends. "Let's never speak of this again," he said. "It's over now. We should let the past rest." The others nodded in agreement. They knew. The Ghost Bride of Chiang Mai. In the lush, historical city of Chiang Mai, the grand temples and serene landscapes concealed a tale of sorrow and vengeance. Suda was a young woman from a prominent family, known for her beauty and grace. Despite her outwardly perfect life, Suda's heart was heavy with despair. She was engaged to marry a wealthy man chosen by her family, a man she did not love. Her days were filled with the echoes of her own unhappiness and the oppressive weight of duty. The wedding was set to be the event of the year, a union that promised to enhance her family's social standing. However, Suda's feelings of isolation and betrayal grew unbearable. As the wedding day approached, she felt as if her life was slipping through her fingers, with no escape in sight. On the eve of her wedding, the night was dark and stormy, the skies reflecting Suda's inner turmoil. She slipped away from the mansion, leaving behind the opulence and grandeur of her impending wedding. With a heavy heart and tears streaming down her face, she walked to the river that meandered through the outskirts of the city. In the moonlight, the water looked cold and indifferent, mirroring her own despair. At the river's edge, Suda uttered a final, anguished cry and stepped into the water, letting the currents pull her under. As she drowned, her final thoughts were of rage and sorrow, and her last words were a curse upon her family for forcing her into a life of misery. The river, a silent witness to her demise, claimed her spirit, binding it to the place of her death. Years passed, and the story of Suda's tragic end became a cautionary tale among the locals. Yet, her spirit was far from resting. Rumors began to circulate about a ghostly figure in a wedding dress who roamed the city, haunting newlyweds and seeking revenge for her unfulfilled dreams. Suda's spirit had transformed into a ghost bride, eternally trapped between the world of the living and the dead. The spirit of Suda would appear in her wedding dress, her face veiled and her eyes filled with despair. Her presence was often accompanied by a chilling wind and an inexplicable sense of dread. Newlyweds who encountered her were said to suffer from misfortune, illness, or even death, as if the ghost bride sought to drag them into her own fate. One evening, as the sun set over Chiang Mai, a young woman named Nari prepared for her own wedding. She was a descendant of Suda's family, and the preparations for the grand event were underway. The bride was excited, but a shadow of unease loomed over her. Despite the joy of her forthcoming nuptials, whispers of Suda's ghostly legend haunted her dreams. Nari's family had always been aware of the curse, but they had dismissed it as folklore. The family's fortunes had changed since Suda's death, and they believed they had left the past behind. But as the wedding day approached, unsettling occurrences began to plague Nari's preparations, objects moving on their own, sudden chills, and eerie sounds at night. On the eve of Nari's wedding, as the city prepared for the festivities, the stormy weather seemed to echo the turmoil of the past. The winds howled through the streets, carrying with them a sense of foreboding. Nari and her family tried to ignore the growing sense of dread, attributing it to the stress of the upcoming event. Late that night, while Nari slept, her dreams were haunted by a vision of a ghostly bride. The figure appeared in her wedding dress, her face obscured by a veil, but Nari could feel the intense sorrow and rage emanating from her. The ghost bride reached out, her fingers icy and cold, as if trying to take Nari's place. Nari awoke in a cold sweat, her heart racing. She knew she had to confront whatever was haunting her. Desperate for answers, she reached out to her grandmother, who had always been the keeper of family lore. Her grandmother listened with a grave expression, confirming the old stories about Suda's curse. The ghost bride seeks to replace the bride of the family, her grandmother explained. She wants to fulfill the life she was denied. To prevent her from taking you, we must perform a ritual to appease her spirit and lay her to rest. Determined to protect Nari and honor the memory of her ancestor, the family began preparations for the ritual. They consulted with local shamans and spiritual experts who had knowledge of ancient rites and ceremonies. The ritual needed to be performed at the river where Suda had died, and it required specific offerings and prayers to appease the restless spirit. The night before the wedding, the family and their chosen spiritual guides made their way to the river. The storm had abated, leaving a quiet, somber atmosphere. At the river's edge, they set up an altar with offerings of flowers, incense, and food, and began the ritual. The shaman led the ceremony, chanting ancient prayers and invoking the spirits of the ancestors. The family members held hands, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candles as they prayed for Suda's peace. As the ritual progressed, the water began to churn, and an eerie mist rose from the river, swirling around them. Suddenly, the ghostly figure of Suda appeared by the riverbank, her wedding dress flowing in the wind. Her presence was as chilling as the night air, and her eyes burned with a sorrowful fire. The shaman continued to chant, his voice unwavering, while the family offered their deepest apologies and pleas for forgiveness. As the ritual reached its climax, Suda's ghostly form seemed to soften, her expression shifting from rage to one of profound sadness. The shaman poured a special potion into the river, symbolizing the release of the spirit's pain and suffering. The mist around the river began to dissipate, and the waters grew calm. Suda's spirit let out a mournful sigh, her figure slowly fading into the night. The ghost bride's curse was finally lifted, her restless soul finding peace as she was freed from her eternal torment. The wind carried away the last traces of her presence, leaving behind a serene calmness. With the ritual complete, the family returned to their home, the oppressive sense of dread lifting. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, with no sign of the supernatural disturbances that had plagued their preparations. Nari's wedding went off without a hitch, and the joyous celebration was marked by the absence of the ghostly bride. The family felt a deep sense of relief and closure, knowing that they had finally laid the tragic spirit of Suda to rest. As the newlyweds danced under the stars, the river that had once been a place of sorrow now flowed peacefully, a silent testament to the resolution of a story that had haunted the city for far too long. The Ghost of Mae Suang. Nestled in the mountains of northern Thailand, the small village of Ban Suang was known for its serene beauty and close-knit community. The villagers lived simple lives, relying on the lush forests and fertile land to sustain them. But amidst the peaceful surroundings, there was a lingering sadness that cast a shadow over the village, one that was tied to the tragic story of Mae Suang. Mae Suang was a young woman, known for her kindness and gentle nature. She was beloved by all in the village, especially by her husband, a hard-working farmer. Their love was the envy of many, and when Mae Suang became pregnant, the entire village rejoiced. Her pregnancy was smooth, and the villagers eagerly awaited the arrival of the new life that would bring even more joy to their community. But fate had other plans. On the night Mae Suang went into labor, a terrible storm swept through the village. The winds howled, and the rain poured down in torrents, making it impossible to summon the midwife who lived on the other side of the mountain. As the hours passed, Mae Suang's labor became more difficult, and without the necessary help, both she and her unborn child passed away in the dead of night. The grief that followed was immeasurable. Mae Suang's husband was inconsolable, and the villagers mourned the loss of both mother and child. They buried her in a small cemetery overlooking the village, where the mountain winds would forever sing her lullaby. But Mae Suang's spirit did not find peace. Not long after her burial, strange things began to happen in Ban Suang. At night, the villagers heard the heart-wrenching wails of a woman echoing through the mountains. The cries were unmistakable. Mae Suang was mourning the loss of her child. Her spirit, it seemed, had become trapped between worlds, unable to move on without her baby. The villagers grew fearful. Those who lived closest to the cemetery reported seeing a ghostly figure wandering among the graves, her long hair flowing like a dark river in the wind. Mothers with newborns began to have strange dreams in which Mae Suang appeared to them, her face pale and sorrowful. In some dreams, she would smile and bless the child, but in others, her presence was a harbinger of sickness and misfortune. The elders of the village, wise in the ways of spirits and the supernatural, concluded that Mae Suang was searching for her lost child. Her restless spirit would not find peace until she was reunited with her baby, or until she was properly honored by the living. The villagers decided to build a small shrine near Mae Suang's grave. They placed offerings of food, toys, and clothing at the shrine, hoping to appease her spirit. Every new mother in the village was instructed to visit the shrine with her newborn, leaving a small token for Mae Suang in the hopes that her spirit would protect their child rather than curse them. For a time, the offerings seemed to work. The wails grew softer, and the sightings of Mae Suang's ghost became less frequent. But the villagers knew that the peace was fragile. They lived in constant vigilance, making sure to honor Mae Suang with offerings and prayers, lest her spirit grow angry again. Years passed, and the story of Mae Suang became a legend in Ban Suang, a cautionary tale passed down from generation to generation. But those who still heard the soft cries of Mae Suang in the night knew that she was still there, forever searching, forever mourning, her spirit bound to the village by the love and loss she had endured in life. And so, the villagers continued their rituals, offering food and toys at the shrine, whispering prayers into the mountain winds, hoping that one day, Mae Suang would find the peace she so desperately sought. Until then, her ghost would remain a part of Ban Suang, a reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. The haunted forest of Pha Daeng. In the rugged hills of northern Thailand lies the Pha Daeng forest, a vast and ancient woodland that stretches as far as the eye can see. To the locals, the forest is more than just a place of towering trees and wildlife, it is a place of deep mystery and fear. For centuries, stories have circulated about the haunted nature of Pha Daeng, a place where the past refuses to rest and the spirits of the dead linger among the living. The legend of Pha Daeng dates back to a time long forgotten, when a great battle was fought in the heart of the forest. Two rival kingdoms, locked in a bitter struggle for dominance, clashed in the dense woods, their soldiers fighting with a ferocity born of desperation. The battle was brutal and unrelenting, and as the day turned to night, the forest floor was stained with the blood of countless men. The exact details of the battle have been lost to time, but one thing remains clear: the soldiers who died there never truly left. The spirits of these fallen warriors are said to haunt the Pha Daeng forest, trapped in an eternal loop of their final moments. Those who dare to venture too far into the forest report strange and terrifying encounters. The air grows heavy with an unnatural stillness, and the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the calls of birds, fade away, replaced by an eerie silence that chills the soul. Travelers often speak of hearing ghostly whispers carried on the wind, the voices unintelligible but filled with sorrow and despair. Some have seen shadowy figures moving among the trees, their forms flickering like the flames of dying candles. These apparitions, believed to be the spirits of the soldiers, seem lost, forever searching for a way out of the forest that holds them captive. One of the most famous tales associated with the Pha Daeng forest involves a group of hunters who entered the woods in search of game. The men were experienced, well versed in the ways of the forest, but nothing could have prepared them for what they encountered that day. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew oppressive, and a sense of dread settled over them like a thick fog. The hunters soon found themselves in an unfamiliar part of the forest, the trees twisted and gnarled as if warped by some ancient curse. As they pressed on, they began to hear the sounds of battle, the clashing of swords, the cries of dying men. But when they looked around, there was nothing to be seen, only the trees and the shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Terrified, the hunters turned to leave, but the forest had changed around them. Paths that had once been clear were now overgrown, and the way out seemed to shift and twist with every step. It was as if the forest itself was alive, conspiring to keep them trapped within its haunted depths. As night fell, the hunters' fear turned to panic. They could feel eyes watching them from the darkness, and every sound, every rustle of leaves, set their nerves on edge. One by one, the hunters vanished into the night, their screams echoing through the trees, swallowed by the shadows. Only one man made it out of the Pha Daeng forest, his mind shattered by the horrors he had witnessed. He spoke of ghostly soldiers who had surrounded him, their eyes hollow and their faces twisted in agony. They had reached out to him, their hands cold as death, as if begging for help that he could not give. He had run, blindly and desperately, until he finally stumbled out of the forest, his body and spirit broken. The villagers found the man the next morning, wandering at the edge of the forest, muttering incoherently about the spirits that haunted the woods. He never fully recovered, and his story only added to the legend of Pha Daeng. Over time, the villagers came to understand that the Pha Daeng forest was a place where the dead could not find peace. The spirits of the soldiers, bound to the site of their final battle, were doomed to relive their deaths for all eternity. The forest had become their prison, and anyone who ventured too close risked becoming ensnared in their ghostly torment. Local lore advises against entering the forest at night, when the spirits are most active and the boundaries between the living and the dead are at their weakest. Those who must enter the forest are warned to carry protective charms and to show respect for the spirits that dwell within. Even then, there is no guarantee of safety. To this day, the Pha Daeng forest remains a place of fear and mystery, a reminder of the darker side of nature and the unseen forces that can bind the living to the dead. Those who live near the forest still hear the whispers on the wind, and the shadows that move among the trees serve as a constant reminder that in the Pha Daeng forest, the past is never truly gone. The Ghost of Wat Samphran. Wat Samphran, a majestic temple located near Bangkok, is renowned for its striking architecture, a towering pink structure encircled by a colossal dragon spiraling up its height. The temple, with its vibrant colors and unique design, attracts visitors from all over the world who come to marvel at its beauty and to find spiritual solace. Yet, behind its awe-inspiring exterior, Wat Samphran holds a secret that many dare not speak of, a resident ghost that has haunted its grounds for generations. The story of the Ghost of Wat Samphran begins many years ago with a monk named Krasue. Krasue was revered throughout the region for his unwavering dedication to the spiritual path. He lived a life of strict discipline, spending most of his time in deep meditation and prayer. The other monks at Wat Samphran looked up to him as a model of virtue and spiritual purity, and his presence at the temple was a source of great inspiration. Krasue's devotion was such that he often went without food or sleep, focusing all his energy on achieving enlightenment. It was said that he could sit in meditation for days on end, unmoved by the world around him, his mind transcending the material realm. Visitors to the temple would sometimes catch glimpses of him, seated in deep contemplation beneath the shadow of the great dragon that wound its way around the temple structure. But one fateful day, Krasue's life came to an abrupt end. The exact circumstances of his death are shrouded in mystery. Some say he passed away peacefully during meditation, his soul leaving his body as he achieved the ultimate state of nirvana. Others whisper of a more tragic ending, a sudden illness that struck him down in the prime of his spiritual journey. Regardless of how he died, one thing became clear in the days that followed: Krasue's spirit had not left Wat Samphran. It began subtly at first. The monks who remained at the temple would feel an unexplained chill during their evening prayers, a cold breeze that seemed to come from nowhere, even on the warmest of nights. They would hear soft footsteps echoing through the halls, though no one else was present. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, a faint chanting could be heard, as if Krasue's spirit was continuing his prayers from beyond the grave. The first full sighting of the ghost occurred during a midnight meditation session. A young monk, newly ordained and still adjusting to the monastic life, was struggling to keep his focus. As he sat in the dimly lit hall, trying to calm his restless mind, he suddenly felt a presence behind him. Turning around, he saw the unmistakable figure of Krasue, his robes glowing faintly in the darkness. The ghost did not speak but simply nodded at the young monk before vanishing into thin air. Word of the sighting spread quickly, and soon other monks began to report similar experiences. Krasue's ghost was seen in various parts of the temple, sometimes watching over the monks as they prayed, other times appearing in the meditation hall, offering silent guidance to those who were struggling. Despite his ghostly nature, Krasue's spirit was not feared. On the contrary, many of the monks believed that he had remained at Wat Samphran to continue his role as a spiritual teacher, guiding them from beyond the veil of death. However, the ghost of Wat Samphran was not always so benign. The legend grew that Prasam Chai's spirit, while generally peaceful, could be roused to anger if the temple was disrespected. There were tales of visitors who had mocked the temple's practices or behaved disrespectfully toward the sacred grounds, only to find themselves stricken with misfortune shortly thereafter. One story tells of a man who scoffed at the idea of ghosts and loudly proclaimed that he feared no spirits. The next day, he was found unconscious at the base of the dragon temple, his face twisted in terror. When he awoke, he claimed to have seen the ghost of Prasam Chai, who had warned him to never again disrespect the temple. Over time, these stories became an integral part of Wat Samphran's lore. Visitors, both local and foreign, would come to the temple not only to admire its architecture but also to pay their respects to the spirit of Prasam Chai. Offerings were left at the base of the great dragon, and prayers were said in his honor, asking for his blessings and guidance. Despite the eerie presence of the ghost, Wat Samphran remained a place of peace and spiritual reflection. The monks, now accustomed to the occasional visit from Prasam Chai's spirit, continued their daily routines with a sense of reverence and respect for the departed monk. They knew that as long as they honored the temple and its traditions, Prasam Chai's spirit would continue to watch over them, offering protection and wisdom from the beyond. To this day, visitors to Wat Samphran are advised to approach the temple with respect and humility. Those who do may just catch a glimpse of the ghostly monk during evening prayers, a silent guardian of the temple he loved so dearly in life and continues to protect in death. The legend of Prasam Chai lives on, woven into the fabric of Wat Samphran, a reminder of the enduring power of faith and the thin line that separates the living from the dead. The Ghost of Phai Ta Khon. In the heart of the Isan region, nestled within the mountains of northeastern Thailand, lies the small village of Dan Sai. Every year, the village comes alive with the vibrant and colorful Phai Ta Khon festival, a unique celebration that merges Buddhist and animist traditions to honor spirits and ancestors. The festival is famous for its lively parades, where villagers don elaborately decorated masks and costumes, transforming themselves into the playful spirits known as Phai Ta Khon. The event is filled with music, dancing, and joy as the villagers revel in the belief that the spirits are joining them in the festivities. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly joyous celebration lies a darker tale that few dare to speak of, a tale of a spirit that was summoned during the festival long ago, a spirit that refused to leave when the celebrations ended. The story begins several centuries ago, during one of the early Phai Ta Khon festivals. At that time, the festival was a more intimate affair, a deeply spiritual event where the villagers would invite the spirits of their ancestors to return to the mortal realm and join them in the celebration. The villagers believed that the spirits would come and go as they pleased, taking part in the festivities before returning to the spirit world when the time was right. One year, a powerful shaman, known for his ability to communicate with the spirit world, was invited to lead the rituals. The shaman was a mysterious figure, respected and feared in equal measure by the villagers. His rituals were known to be potent, and his connection to the spirit world was said to be unparalleled. It was this shaman who, during the festival, performed a ritual that would change the village of Dan Sai forever. As the villagers danced and sang, the shaman called upon the spirits to join them, chanting incantations in a language long forgotten. The air grew thick with energy, and the atmosphere became charged with an otherworldly presence. The spirits, as they had always done, came forth to partake in the celebration, their ethereal forms dancing alongside the masked villagers. But something was different that year. Amidst the swirling spirits, one entity stood apart, a powerful and malevolent spirit that had been drawn to the village by the shaman's ritual. This spirit was not like the playful Phai Ta Khon that the villagers knew and loved. It was ancient and dark, harboring a deep resentment toward the living. The shaman, realizing the danger too late, tried to banish the spirit back to the other world, but his efforts were in vain. The spirit refused to leave, binding itself to the village and the festival that had summoned it. From that year on, the villagers noticed a change during the Phi Ta Khon festival. Amidst the joyous celebrations, strange occurrences began to happen. Masks would go missing, only to be found later in strange and unsettling places. Participants in the festival would feel an icy chill as they danced, as if unseen eyes were watching them from the shadows. And then there were the accidents, seemingly minor at first, but growing more severe with each passing year. People tripping and falling, carts overturning, even fires breaking out with no apparent cause. Whispers began to circulate among the villagers about a spirit that had been left behind, a ghost that now roamed the village during the festival. This spirit, which came to be known as Phi Ta Khon, was different from the others. It did not come to join in the fun, it came to sow discord and mischief, feeding off the fear and confusion it created. The villagers soon realized that this spirit was drawn to those who did not respect the traditions of the festival, those who treated the celebration as a mere spectacle rather than a sacred event. As the years went by, the villagers adapted their rituals to appease the ghost of Phi Ta Khon. They made offerings of food and drink, leaving them at the edge of the village in hopes that the spirit would be satisfied and leave them in peace. Special dances and chants were performed to honor the spirit, acknowledging its presence and asking for its mercy. Despite these efforts, the ghost remained a constant presence, lurking in the background of the festival, waiting for the slightest misstep. The most terrifying aspect of the ghost was its ability to blend in with the other masked dancers. Dressed in a mask and costume like the rest, the ghost was indistinguishable from the living participants. Many believed they had danced alongside it, only to realize later that the figure they had been next to had no shadow, or that its footsteps made no sound. Some claimed to have seen the ghost's true form, a twisted, grotesque version of the traditional Phi Ta Khon mask, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into one's soul. Over time, the villagers came to accept the ghost of Phi Ta Khon as a part of the festival, an eerie reminder of the thin veil between the worlds of the living and the dead. The festival continued to be a time of joy and celebration, but with an undercurrent of caution and respect for the unseen forces that were now a permanent part of their lives. Today, the Phi Ta Khon festival remains one of Thailand's most famous cultural events, attracting visitors from all over the world. But for the villagers of Dan Sai, the festival is more than just a celebration, it is a time to honor their ancestors, to revel in the spirit of community, and to pay homage to the ghost that has become an indelible part of their history. They know that as long as they respect the traditions and make the proper offerings, the ghost of Phi Ta Khon will remain content, watching over the festival from the shadows, a silent guardian of the past. But they also know that the ghost is always there, waiting for the moment when someone forgets the true meaning of the festival, ready to remind them of the dark forces that still linger in their midst.